Biofriendly Podcast. It's the Biofriendly Podcast.
Yes. Hello there.
Hey there. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful.
Do you have water?
I'm having my throat keeps getting a bubble. You
Don't
know the
do that.
bubbles, the
Yeah.
throat bubbles.
Throat bubbles?
What's gonna be great is when people are listening to the podcast and they hear me go.
Oh, it's the best. Everybody who listens to podcasts loves a good throat bubble. They're delicious. Yeah, I've got my water as well, hydrating.
Throat Bubble are opening up for Jellyfish Blackout this Friday at the El Rey.
Another great opener
Another
band.
great band name.
Yeah. Well, it's another day, another time for the Biofriendly Podcast. And today, I'm excited. I'm really excited.
Why would you be excited, Jacob?
I'm excited because we have a special guest.
What?
We do. And this is going to become a thing on the show. We're going to have guests. And we're going to learn more and more how we can use technology to bring people on the other side of the planet to us.
Before we start this, can I?
Yeah.
Is this because I've not been enough for you?
Yes.
Is that
yes.
you're requiring
100%. I started feeling after a year of the show, I was like, if there's one thing that's lacking, it's Noel.
Yeah, no, it's not the first. You're not the first person to say that.
No. If anything, the audience said, they just said, I'm tired of hearing just you guys.
Yeah, which is also fair. So who do we have?
Well, I'm very excited because we have a world traveler, a man who knows what this planet looks like from all angles. Although I guess the planet doesn't have angles; it's a sphere.
Well, once you're on the surface of the planet, there's angles.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. There's angles here and there.
Yeah.
I mean, from the outside, it's pretty round.
Yeah, well, he is known on Instagram as @thatNorwegianNomad. He is Christopher, the world traveler. So please welcome all the way from Norway, Christopher.
Hey!
Hey guys, it's great to be on.
We're glad to have you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, we're happy to have you here.
It's an honor. Wow.
Thank you for having me. I really hope you guys are having a warmer time than we have because it's freezing right here. Right now.
I was just about to ask what the weather was like currently this time of year.
It's not good. You would not want to trade.
What's the temperature?
Oh, it's sitting pretty close to freezing right now.
Yeah.
Which is surprisingly warm actually.
Yeah.
It's been a very warm winter for us.
See, we don't understand that in California.
No, you wouldn't. Usually we sit around, -10. So this is good for us.
Oh,
wow.
Good. A nice warm February day.
So how long?
Exactly.
How long does winter last in Norway? When does it begin? When does it end?
About 6 to 8 months. No, it's not. It's not that bad. I mean, it depends how you define winter. If we go by your definition, probably year round. But for us, it's probably like a 4-month affair. Not too bad.
Not too bad.
Yeah.
For a brief while, I lived in Chicago in the United States. I don't know if you've ever been there, but that is a place that can get pretty bitter cold here for us in the States.
How cold is cold for you guys?
Well, when I was living there were some winters that were, I guess, I would imagine I'm on Fahrenheit and you're on Celsius.
Once you get to the negatives, I think it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so it was negative, there were some winters that could get down to -10. And that was probably the coldest.
Well, there's odd things that happen in Chicago.
That's not that bad.
Yeah. It's like, that's nothing. That's lightweight stuff.
Chicago gets this lake effect sometimes, and that lake effect combined with a polar vortex, and you can see temperatures, that dip down to like -30, -40, and that's when they really regret living in Chicago.
Yeah.
But that's not normal though.
Yeah. But it sounds like hopefully you're inside.
I was going to say that's around the range we had when I was in northern Russia. Then we had we were touching -40, and it's not a fun time.
Wow.
Northern Russia.
That's like Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Except people are a little bit less friendly.
Yeah. A little less friendly. Yeah, I guess that's right. The Canadians have a reputation for being very friendly. Northern Russia, probably not so much.
Unless you make fun of beer or hockey, and then they get very violent very quickly.
This is true.
I can imagine.
Anyway, well, I'm excited that you're here, and one of the main reasons that we're having you on today is when we got a chance to chat, I know you've done some studies on aviation, the impacts that aviation and world travel has on the climate. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to dig in today, because I think that that's a subject that I don't know a lot about. We did an episode last year called Eco Travel, and I kind of re-listened to it before we did this just to remind us of what we talked about back then. But before I rehash some of those old things, I wanted to dig in and learn a little bit more about you and your background and kind of what's been driving you the past couple of years. What are the things that you've been up to?
Yeah, sure. So I've been traveling a lot. It's been a hectic few years now, and I've been lucky enough to be able to combine my studies with traveling. So I just wrapped up my master's degree now, and then I'm now getting to do some research on what you touched on, which is this aviation question, while also continuing to travel. So it's been really good.
Was that planned that you would did you sort of plan out how you were going to do your education so it would involve travel, or was that a lucky accident that led you to this kind of career?
No, it's my family sort of bounced all around. When I was younger, my parents were split up. My dad lived in the US, so I would go from Norway to the US once or twice a month for a few years.
Yeah.
And my granddad was stationed out in the Middle East for a while, so it's been a lot of traveling my whole life. And I've always loved it. It's fascinating to go around and you meet new people and you enjoy experiencing new cultures. And I used to, when I started studying, I had the free time that sort of enabled me to do it. I didn't have much money to do it with, so it started off very backpacker-esque.
Sure.
But then now, as I've been taking photos around the globe, I'm finally kind of getting paid to travel. So I get to continue doing, what excites me, which is this academic research stuff, while also doing the other thing I love and combining the two. So I can't complain.
That is terrific.
Yeah, his pictures are gorgeous. I highly recommend, you got to go follow him. You got to go check out what he's been posting. Some really great shots. And he's a handsome devil, by the way.
How do they follow this handsome devil again?
It's at that Norwegian nomad, right? I'm getting it right, aren't I?
It might be the longest handle in Instagram history, but that is the one that is. Yeah.
Well, we all need to have our thing, right? Yeah. And yours is long Instagram handles.
Right? Yeah. Exactly. And I started doing this just as to be honest, part of the reason I started doing it was people in uni would start commenting, asking, if I was still attending uni. So I figured I should find a way to show them that I'm not, I'm still alive when I'm never present.
Yes.
And it was never intended to be a commercial kind of thing. So, and then the name stuck, and now I'm stuck with it.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing how that sometimes happens, right? You just kind of live your life, do what you're doing, and the next thing you know, it's, now I've got a career here.
Exactly.
This is what I do.
It's very strange.
That's great.
But it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, what are some of the things? We got a chance to dig into this yesterday a little bit, but what are some of the things that you've learned in terms of aviation and kind of where we are right now? Because I know that this can be somewhat of a hot button topic. If you go out there and you Google, the impacts of flying and climate change, there's a lot of strong opinions on it. But yet there's so many amazing things about air travel that we can do and ways that we can help our planet by being there and being in countries and places around the world where people need support, help, need their economies driven up, So I just want to know a little bit about some of your experience while you've been doing it and living it.
That has to be the longest question
it is.
Turned into I've ever heard in my entire
I'm so sorry.
Life. It was like you had this list of 30 questions and you thought, I'm going to see if I can break them all into one monologue.
I'll talk. I'll talk nonstop for the next 20 minutes.
I like to give Jacob as hard a time as possible, as often as possible.
No, that's okay.
I'll try to touch on all those points.
That my reputation is definitely that I am very brief and never too talkative. You know this about me. So
your scripts are never wordy. Let's start with the first part of that though. Like what concerns you most about the environment, the environmental aspects of travel?
Well, I mean, it's a tricky one because we have obviously travel, not just, traveling around the world, but even things like going to and from work, just the ways in which we travel.
Right.
It's one of the biggest sources of emissions we have, alongside heavy industry. And we are so lucky to live in a world where we are now enabled to be able to go all these places and see all these amazing things. We have all these, low-cost airlines that will take you. I can fly in Norway to London for, 10 euros if I'm lucky.
Wow.
Which is amazing.
That is cool.
But then
10
the flip
euros.
side of the coin, I know it's
like a bus fare.
Me and some friends of mine a few years back had a very late night out, and maybe a few too many drinks, and we woke up with some tickets in our inbox because we found them at that price, and then we just got them.
That's perfect. I love it. You would fit in perfectly with Noel and I. That sounds exactly like we would do what we would do.
Exactly.
So, anyway, go on.
So it's that was a fun time. But no, so we are enabled to do all these things, but at the same time, it's having to care for the planet is becoming a more and more something we're becoming more and more socially conscious of, and it's trying to balance these things. Just look to Greta Thunberg now. When she went to the latest climate talks, she found ways at least she attempted to find ways, and did so for the most part, find ways to travel with zero emissions.
Right.
So we need to try to find ways to basically make these two things meet. Do all these and experience all these amazing things, but without hurting the planet we live on too much.
Yeah,
totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think people don't realize sometimes when they hear, we have Davos, that big environmental conference that happened. We had the climate summit in Madrid just recently, and people talk about the airline, industry, but what they don't realize is there are a lot of efforts being made to try to figure it out. While it may be a problem, you mentioned Noel, when I went back to our last episode, you mentioned even curving the wing tips up was helping fuel efficiency. This is something that was being done to try to make airplanes more efficient. And United just recently last year had one of the first 100% eco-friendly, on biofuels, zero waste on the plane, landed in the LAX Eco Hub, which we were excited to learn about. So there is innovation out there that people are working on how they can make airplanes and air travel more efficient and have less of an impact.
Well, and because it does, and you can obviously jump in and correct if we're wrong on anything here, Christopher, because we're not the experts.
Yeah, we'll do.
But
I'm not a massive expert myself, but it seems all right so far.
So far, the teacher is okay.
You sound smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The aviation industry is driven by money, and one of their most expensive, if not their most expensive cost, is fuel. I mean, apart from the planes themselves, right? Yeah. So they do want to reduce the amount of fuel they're using, and they do want to cut it back, not for environmental reasons, but because they don't want to spend as much money.
Yeah.
But as I understand it, the problem is the growth. The cheaper they make it, the better they get at it, the more people are traveling, and so then there's a need for more planes and more. Yeah. And so I don't know, what is there? Do you have thoughts, Christopher, on are there tricks or tips that you use that help to like individual things that you try to do to make travel more sustainable, even if it isn't to do with with carbon emissions, even just little things to reduce just other aspects of environmental waste or to be sustainable?
Well, when I fly so much that beyond. I do the whole, carbon offsetting thing, which I think everyone should do. It's not a big cost relative to what you're paying to travel, and it's one of those many small things we can do to at least help a little bit.
Absolutely.
I haven't found very many ways to do much about the flying itself. You can always opt for airlines with more modern fleets, but very often, as you pointed out yourself, because fuel is such a big part of the cost, very often the lower cost flights tend to be the more efficient ones, at least here in Europe, very often.
Yeah, sure.
So what I've found is, what we all have to do is find a few things in our life that we can stomach or that we can fit into our schedule, and start there. Make it simple. Don't become overwhelmed by all the options out there. You don't have to, go vegan and also recycle everything and do everything all at the same time. But pick out a few things you can do, and then you can always expand from there. It's like starting to train. You pick out, you start slow. You don't need to start 7 days a week in the gym. Start with what you can do, and then build from there.
Yeah. I need to start just one day in the gym is kind of where I'm at right now. But no, you nailed it. Christopher, that's why I was excited to have you on too, because just the vantage point, the heart of the Biofriendly podcast is about that. It is about that letting people back into helping the planet, because I think it's become a very divisive subject over the past few years, where you're either on one side or you're the other. And I think that if you just let people know, like, look, we get it. You can't hit the reset button and do everything all over again. You're living your life. You have a career. You're in school. You have families. And so I agree. It's all about those little steps, for traveling that we have to do. So.
Yeah, and if you can, I mean, this is obviously it's a greater cost, but if you can do something like it, like if you can get the direct flight to where you're going, that's better.
Yeah,
less taking off and landing is better.
Yeah,
and also as again, this is something that is happening because of financial reasons, but more and more airports being available and more people traveling, the only upside is you can get directly to more places than you used to be able to get, which helps.
Yeah.
No, that is definitely good. But at the same time, I can completely sympathize with people where that might not always be an option.
Sure.
But yeah, it's I think what we need to do is shift this mindset from having almost these, people believing in different ideologies of how to combat this, whether it's, going vegan or fly direct, or, instead of pointing fingers at people not doing what you're doing, let's just all concentrate on finding a few things we can do and then building from there.
Yeah,
right. Because the last thing I want is for people to, because I've also been fortunate enough through business, and my family's from Australia. So through my life, I've been able to travel quite a bit and see a lot of different places. And I don't want people to give up on that, because there are socially sustainable reasons why it's a good idea to get out of where you live.
Oh, absolutely.
And to go somewhere else, because you in order for you to truly understand another culture, or to understand why most people are great. I mean, honestly, most people are pretty great.
Yeah.
When you travel around and you actually talk to people, there's only a small percentage of people who are jerks, and they ruin it for They ruin it for everybody.
Yeah.
So if you actually get to know people who are different than you are, and who have different experiences than you do, then you understand them better, and they understand you better, and then you come home and you spread that, and you bring that to the people who are around you, and that makes the world a better place.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we don't want to stop traveling just because there's a problem for it environmentally.
Right.
It's just, let's see what other ways we can clean ourselves up a bit. Carbon offsets is a great point.
Yeah.
What can we do to ourselves to cut back on our own carbon emission footprint? And I wondered, and we probably haven't looked this up, and now that we're in the middle of the podcast, of course, I'm thinking of it.
This is classic us, though. We come in very unprepared, and I look down at my screen as if I'm ready and I know what I'm doing, and I don't. So go ahead, go for it. What are you going to say?
Do either of you know if there is a service that calculates what your travel carbon footprint is? Like, so if you're planning, I'm going to fly. Yeah,
definitely be.
Because I feel like that would be a useful thing to know. If you know that I'm flying, okay, I'm doing a trip to New York, in 2 weeks, and what is that going to cost emissions wise? And then you can sort of factor for yourself, okay, if I've done this, what do I need to offset? What can I do to try to pull back on emissions elsewhere, to pull back on my carbon footprint in another way, or just to help from an issue of sustainability another way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and Christopher, you mentioned getting carbon offsets. That's a service that you can do, right? Like you can go online and invest in them. Isn't that something that
yes, you can. I don't fly very much stateside anymore.
Yeah.
I will be back soon.
Well, you have to come visit us. Come to LA.
But I know here in Europe, the vast majority of airlines will actually allow you to do it when you purchase your ticket.
That's
great.
I
also know there are services out there, if you don't trust the airline's calculation, where you can go to third-party sites and input your origin and your destination, and they will calculate it for you, and then you can use these impartial third parties to basically offset your carbon there.
If you could send us some links so that we could share that on our pages so people can see that'd be really great. And just for our audience, if you don't know what that means, basically a carbon offset is someone else somewhere else has done something to reduce their carbon footprint, to cut back on carbon emissions,
right.
And that has a value. Them doing that has a value. So basically, you can you can buy that. You can invest. You're investing in that. Is basically what that means. Your money goes towards them doing more of that.
So it helps equal things out.
Yeah.
Right. Which is a really cool thing to do.
One very common one is people planting trees, because trees pull the carbon back out of the atmosphere. So some clever mathematician has worked out X tons of CO2 emissions, equals X hectares of tree planting, for lack of a better word, and then you can basically pay to attempt to take this back out of the atmosphere.
Right, and that's how that helps. That's the way you can sort of contribute to that. And there's more and more of that happening. They're doing a lot of stuff in the ocean. We kind of mentioned this a couple podcasts ago about some stuff they're doing with algae and with seaweed and with other. There's a ton of different ways that people are coming up with to help fight this problem, and you're basically aiding in those by paying for carbon offsets.
Yeah. One of the things that I read that said while you're traveling, one thing that you can do, you want to know what it is?
I would love to hear it.
Stay for a while.
Yes.
I was very worried you'd say stay. That aligns poorly with what I'm currently doing.
That's okay. You do what you got to do, but they were basically saying what I thought it gives people an excuse to stay on their vacations for a very long time.
I'm very much in favor of stay.
Yeah.
If I could, I'm flying to Bali tomorrow, and if I could stay longer than I intend to stay, I would be extremely happy. Of course,
and I get that. And 100%, a lot of us have. When Noel and I travel, it's over a weekend. We got to go and we got to come back, and that's just a nature of the beast. But I thought it was pretty funny that people around the world who don't get to travel very often, when you do, stay a while. Go make that vacation as long as you can, because the longer you can invest in that local community's economy, you can buy, you can eat, you can drink, you can stay local, and while you're there, you're trying not to buy plastics and contributing to the pollution in that area. So that I thought, for me, I was like, that is a cool thing when we have the luxury to do it. When you travel, stay a minute.
Yeah, and that's and to that point also, if for instance you're going to Bali, if you had been a person who had always wanted to go to Australia and had never gone, well you're practically there. So that this
Might as well.
while you're there, you just stay in that area, and then you're traveling less to do that. Now obviously that's hard because people have jobs and they have their lives and you have family, and the kids have to get to the soccer game and all that kind of stuff. So
stupid obligations.
Yeah. So we get that, but but yeah, if you're a retired person, for instance, right? Because one of the big things you do in America is you retire, and then that's your chance to go see the world.
Yeah.
So really do it. If you're gonna go to Europe, do it. Stay there for for as long as they will let you stay there, and visit as many countries as you can, and go ahead and get it done.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, and also just as a traveler, it's when you go somewhere and you stay for a short amount of time, there is a level of superficiality to that. You have to actually spend some time in an area and get beyond just seeing the sights and then leaving to actually get a feel for what a certain place and a certain people and a certain culture is like. So you get so much more. Your gain from being there sort of increases exponentially the longer you stay. Which is nice.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
It is very nice. Now, I'm going to ask another question, and I promise that this one will be just one.
Okay.
I promise.
Let's see if you can do it, folks.
I read something about how in the development of where we could go with planes, that, with a plane, you have it full of fuel, and it takes off heavy, and it lands light because it went through the burning up of the fuel.
Sure.
Whereas if you were going to have an electric plane, which good God, that battery would weigh probably too much to even get it off the ground.
There's a lot of problems with electric planes right now.
Right.
At the moment,
but the idea being, is it that they were saying in this article, is it even possible to have a aircraft that would be electric because of the weight problem?
It is possible, because when it's full, it does get up there.
Yeah.
And people do have to land them full. It happens. Like when you're up and there's an emergency, you got to come back down. I mean, they can do it. The planes are designed to deal with it. So it's not, the problem is, the weight is an issue, but not.
It's not that much of an issue.
They can figure that out. The biggest issue is that you need an incredibly efficient, enormous battery. and that it's a problem on a plane because the batteries, the planes, they use them. Once you
Right.
have a plane, that thing is going to be in the air for years.
Right.
And,
right.
and these batteries don't quite last as they are now. They don't quite last long enough to be financially viable for any airline ever to buy one of that size on a plane. And also, lithium batteries have a tendency to catch fire, which when you're on the ground is not great, but you can get out of it.
You're right.
But if you're in the air, forget it. Like you
Right.
can't granted, by a tendency, I mean, it's still a very tiny percentage. It doesn't happen a
But
lot.
still, I think
but
people would be like,
it's enough. It's enough, and because you're in the sky, that it's a problem. So
Right.
the investment right now in electric plane technology is actually focused pretty heavily on batteries, on solving the battery problem.
Really?
Yeah, it's going to have to be a different battery.
Yeah. Is that Christopher? Is that some of the stuff that you've seen as well?
I have two thoughts to that point. The first
Sure.
one being,
Nice.
I mean, we've seen the problem Boeing's been having the last few years just with small batteries. You can imagine, batteries catching fire that are way bigger would not
Right.
be, wouldn't be a good thing.
Right.
But also, I mean, if to the point of the more technical question of whether it's feasible, I'm no engineer, and there are people way smarter than me working on it out there. But if you've seen, development we've had just with electric cars in the last 15 to 20 years, there are a lot of very clever people working on it. And I would imagine that it is something we solve, but it's more a question of time. When it comes to the whole issue of global warming, time is something we're quickly running out of. So,
Right.
it's finding this balance of whether we can find the solutions we need within the time frame we have.
Yes.
Right, and that's the thing where we talk a lot about energy transition on this podcast because that's kind of a topic that we have a product we sell that essentially it's a time buyer, right? We work with the UN to reduce air pollution by catalyzing fuel, and then that gives you about a 7% reduction in greenhouse gases. And so that doesn't fix a problem, and we recognize that. But what it does is it extends the timeline a little bit so that we can fix the problem with the better
Right.
solutions. And so this is where concepts like carbon offsets, like there's a lot of complaints about natural gas in the U.S. because there's in New York they were not allowing the utilities to put in natural gas heating in replacement for fuel oil. Now, fuel oil is terrible for the environment. It has a
Right.
massive carbon footprint.
Right.
It's bad, right?
Right.
Natural gas is really terrible in terms of particulate matter and isn't great in that regard. But in terms of greenhouse gases, is very clean.
It's an improvement.
It's not. It is not the solution. It's not the solution. And I think that's something we need to recognize as a green community. Is some of the stuff we have to do isn't going to be what we're going to do long term. It's what we're doing now because we have to do something now to fix the problem so that we can get to the better solution, so we can get that electric plane in the sky, so we can get more renewable energy, so we can find better ways of capturing solar energy, so that we can keep doing that, because the money's going towards that and the technology will be there, and it'll be there faster than we think, but we still need to buy that time. And that's
Exactly.
a lot of what this podcast is about, is what things can we do to help extend that timeline and give ourselves more time for the geniuses out there to fix the problems.
Yeah, is solar even an option on a plane?
Solar's not even an option on a car.
I don't think you could find enough surface area on a plane. You need a very, very thin, very large plane. And you have trouble finding somewhere to land it.
So that's something that's still being worked on. So it's not really, something that we can do as of where we are right now.
Solar technology needs a lot of development, and they're working on it. It's another one of those things.
What about wind technology on a plane? You can't just power the plane on the wind.
Jacob, you're my favorite.
Right.
Jacob, you're my favorite.
I mean, come on.
I love the logic.
Yeah, come on, guys. Can't you? I mean, this is why I don't work for JPL.
Yeah.
Because, I look at a big wind turbine and I'm like, come on, we can put that in the air for sure, right? I guess not. So you're telling me that's a no. That's a hard no?
It's a hard no for now.
Okay.
I'm not saying that a perpetually energy generating wind tunnel wouldn't work.
I'm quite certain there are some laws of physics being broken there.
Okay, so the problem is you could get it up in the air, but it would never come down because it would just constantly be
the only way you'd get it in the air is by having something else put it in the air.
Oh, okay.
And then
then we're back to where we started.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, guys, I don't know how planes work. That's why we have Christopher on the show.
That's right. Well,
Exactly.
I have one question that has nothing to do with the environment. it, but I absolutely want to hear your point of view. I was on the social media, which is always a bad start to to my day. But I was on the social media, and I saw this scandal thing on this woman who was recording a person who was behind her because she'd pushed her seat back, and that person was punching the seat.
I saw that video.
Yes.
I saw that video.
And then
did you see it?
The two of them handled it like total adults, and then it ended up being like this whole nightmare of a situation. So what I wanted to ask is, what is your feeling on pushing the seat back?
Oh, that's a great question.
That depends a lot on whether it's my seat being pushed back.
Okay.
Yes.
If it's my seat, it's very okay. If it's the person in front of me, not so much. I think that's the unspoken rule of this guy.
Totally.
That's great.
I think it's great that you brought this up because I didn't even know, by the way, that people had strong opinions on you leaning your chair back. I thought it was okay, but I found out later that like half the world thinks that if you lean the chair back, you're a monster, and the other half of the world.
I'm going to let you in on a little secret. If you put enough people in a small confined space, people have strong opinions on everything.
Well said, Christopher.
It
Well
can be
said.
what you eat, it can be what you wear, it can be what you do, what you say, how loud you say it. People are going to have very strong opinions on most things.
Man, ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
The centrifuge of decisions.
I wonder where that etiquette's going to go. If it's going to be one of those things where they stop having the reclining seats if it's intended for short flights, because they just want to avoid the fights, or if it's like.
Well, I'll let you in on this. There's one unspoken rule that more people should be aware of.
Okay, please.
If you're the unfortunate soul that ends up with a middle seat, you do get both armrests.
Right.
This is non-negotiable.
Right.
This is always the case.
I think that's I think that's actually pretty fair. If you're in the middle seat, you get both armrests because you have nowhere else to go.
Exactly.
You're a prisoner of two people that have space that exists outside of their seat that they can go into, but you don't have that luxury. I agree with that. I'm on board.
So let's go ahead and promote that rule because I think people need to understand that because oftentimes you get stuck in the middle and you're like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. And there's you never know when your arm is touching a stranger's arm, like is that okay? You know, like when you're both on the armrest and you're making that little gentle contact, you're like, are they cool with it? But you feel this feeling like you got to withdraw like right away, like, oh no, I can't make contact, but I kind of have to. I'm a husky guy. Like I said, I can barely get to the gym. You know what I'm saying?
Become a bigger guy. There we go. Problem solved. But no, too many times I've done this, this little dance you do with the person sitting next to you where you're like trying to like jam your elbow in, and he's trying to jam his elbow in.
I know this dance.
Oh yeah.
You can have this like 2 hour long little war going on. It lasts the whole flight. But everyone loses. Just go by the rules.
Yeah, the rules. So if you're by the window, lean up against the window and use that armrest. Yeah. And then if you are in the aisle, lean up against the aisle and use the
aisle. You get to lean. Yeah. The guy in the middle doesn't get to lean.
He has
the guy
nowhere to
or
lean.
lady in the middle doesn't get to lean.
And if you take your socks off on a plane, you do not belong in the sky.
Who does that? That is a freak of nature.
A flight I was on now recently, a guy took off his socks and then put him up like against the back of the seat in front of him. It's impossible not to look at the guy in the middle seat. So both me and the guy opposite sides of him had to sit with this, delicious view of these very hairy, unpleasant feet. And he was with noise cancelling headphones on. So there was nothing we could do about it.
God, is that the worst thing that's happened to you in a plane?
It's pretty high up there.
Okay.
Needless to say, I did not give him his armrest. I took that away.
Good for you. Good for you.
There are some exceptions to the rule.
Right.
You stand your ground in the sky. That's what you got to do.
You got to teach people lessons.
It's a ruthless place up there.
It is. Like you said, you put a bunch of people in a very tight space, and people, boy, they got opinions.
I'm worried that we've made travel less exciting for people with this.
Well, that's hey, if you're brave enough to do it, then do it. But if you're not, then stay home.
Yeah, it's the new old frontier.
Yeah, exactly.
Another funny thing is the conversation with the person next to you, right? It's like I like to know the people who are around me, like at least have a little conversation.
Sure.
But there's an art to it. You don't want it to be so long that you spend the whole flight talking to the person next to you.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get a person who's just so glad to be talking to somebody that you start the conversation and you think, oh, this is okay. I'm being polite and being nice, and then okay, I've now got a 5-hour conversation the whole way to Washington.
Yeah. It's a dangerous game you're playing.
It is.
Talking to the person next to you.
You got to have the subtle cues, like
That being
slowly
said,
doing headphones.
I've met some of the most fascinating people on random flights.
That's true.
I remember I was flying, where was I flying? I was flying from London to the US to Boston, actually. And I met this guy sitting next to me who is an oil contractor he does security on oil platforms in Africa.
Oh, wow.
And apparently he's been kidnapped like 5 times, and it's a fairly like common occurrence on his job.
What? I would have loved to hear that said casually.
Like literally real life Indiana Jones type character.
Wow.
And it was just fascinating. We probably talked for 3 hours, him just telling me stories, and the flight just flying by.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you can find some gems up there as well.
Absolutely.
Right.
We have to.
And for those of us in the audience who are Indiana Jones types, feel free to talk to the person next to you. They want to hear your stories.
That's right.
That's what
just rip their noise canceling headphones off and just tell them your life story.
Tell them your life story. Well, we got to wrap things up. I want to be respectful of your time, and I'm really grateful that you came on the show. And I guess, is there anything else before we say goodbye that you wanted to share, or anything you'd like to promote or talk about on the show? We are grateful to have you here.
No, I've had an amazing time. There is one really exciting project we're working on now, me and a few close friends of mine.
Cool.
It touches on this. I'll just take a quick minute now, but no, we've been talking about how it's great to find small things you can do, and a lot of retailers and other sort of parties that starting to really embrace this as well. So me and a few friends of mine now have launched. We're in the process of launching this. Concept called Nico, and it's essentially clothing that's manufactured from recycled plastics, like recycled ocean plastics.
Cool.
I love that.
So if you want to get some really really cool board shorts or t-shirts or whatever, and still want to do your part, then it's definitely something to look into. I'll send you guys links to this as well, alongside the carbon emission offsetting thing. And if anyone wants to look into it, it's a great cause, and you can look great, feel great, and be doing a bit of good all at the same time.
That is terrific.
That is super cool, and we would love to share that and post that out there in the world, because that's exactly the cool stuff that we like to talk about on here. So that's great. Very exciting.
Turning ocean plastic into clothes, that's our jam right there.
Heck yeah.
It's amazing. And if you follow along, you'll see a lot. You'll see some of it now when we go to Bali. We are actually doing some shoots for that, and also working on like a reef conservation project up in the north part of Ireland. So if you're interested in these sorts of things, there might be, depending on timing, which could be so much fun, we might be able to sneak in a little visit to Turtle Hatchery if they're being born around now, and then you get to see some baby turtles as well.
What?
So that could be good fun.
Oh, that's great.
great.
Yes, definitely. Please keep us posted on all this so we can make sure that that we're letting our fans know what's going on and how to watch.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. We're going to be sharing all this great stuff.
Guys. I've had an amazing time. I'd love to come on again sometime in the future.
And we would love to have you
back somewhere with less jungle and more Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Well,
and if you come to Los Angeles, if you come to California, you got to come by. We got to take you out for drinks and end up buying plane tickets to some random part of the world.
Exactly. Hopefully we're not going. Actually, I'm not going to badmouth any destination.
Right. Anything's possible.
I'll make sure we go somewhere nice.
Yeah.
Everywhere is nice.
Everywhere is nice. All right, Christopher. Well, all the best to you. Safe travels, and we'll talk soon.
Great. We'll stay in touch.
All right.
You guys.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Right, bye.
Okay. Bye. Well, I could have just ended the episode there. I think we should, because, he's just an amazing guy, and I had a blast. But we got to do our tags at the end.
Oh, we got to do our tags.
We got to say that we're your beacon of light in a gloomy environment. That one stays.
That
forever.
one will always be there. Mm-hmm. Not just charismatic megafauna.
Yes, and this parasympathetic nerve something.
Activity.
Parasympathetic nerve activity.
We're going to check it.
We
just
had
triple check it.
There was another one about not giving up, not quitting.
It is greater parasympathetic
nerve activity. I was so close.
You're close. You're getting it.
So close.
Yeah.
Well, you guys.
No, yeah, there wasn't. Was there? You know what? Let's just keep it.
We'll keep it to that. We'll keep it to that. We'll look over the notes and we'll see where we're at.
We'll check notes. Call in if you remember what our tagline is.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you next time.
And thank you so much, Christopher, for joining us.
Thank you, Christopher. You rock. Remember, at that Norwegian Nomad is his Instagram.
That Norwegian Nomad.
Yes, it is a mouthful. That's that Norwegian Nomad. That Norwegian Nomad. That Norwegian Nomad.
Yes, the @ is just a symbol.
Yeah.
For our
hopefully
our
they know
people
that.
who don't go on Instagram.
All right. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.
It's the Biofriendly Podcast. It's the Biofriendly Podcast.